Welcome to The Wire. I'm Chris, and today we have Daniel Tomo Thomson, who you know as the designer behind the Sci-Fi, the Omni, the SKX, and many more shapes like the Evo, which is not just one of my favorite boards, but after several years is still one of the most popular boards at surf shops around the world. This conversation that you're about to hear was recorded during the Hurley Trestles Pro in September, and it covers many things. My favorite part begins at around 31 minutes in, when Daniel talks about the low point in his life where he could have given up, but instead set the path to where he is now. He also talks about his experience designing boards with Kelly Slater, Stu Kennedy, and others. He shares the totally backwards approach to designing surfboards for big waves and why it works so well, especially under the feet of Peter Mell. That's only a teaser. There is a lot more in this episode. Here is Daniel Tomo Thomson. Dan, we're live. We're recording.
Right on.
We're here in Carlsbad, California, just up the road from Firewire. You're here in the States for the Hurley Pro at Trestles. You're traveling with Stu Kennedy?
Yeah.
And, you're going to go up to his heat later today. He's surfing around noon. What's the process like for you being at a contest while Stu is surfing?
Well, I guess I'm there just for a bit of moral support and obviously keep an eye on his equipment and make sure it's working as it should be. Uh-huh. And also just make sure he's making the right decisions with his equipment. So that's priority one for being around the events, and also just being supportive while I'm here, keeping him on a good program, and just being a good mate. So,
well, you mentioned trying to help him get on the right boards. His whole quiver for the contest is SKXs and Sci-Fis, right?
Yes, that's right.
What differences do you see in his surfing between those two boards? Like, what informs the way that you advise him as far as what board to surf when?
I think we just look at each given day and the conditions on hand, and then make a decision based off that. Obviously, the Sci-Fi has been going super well for him over the last couple of years. So, obviously that's always right there as a go-to board, especially when the waves are small. For a place like Trestles, it's clearly a go-to design for him here, where he wants to enhance that speed and low drag and get that really sharp, exciting surfing going. So I think that's probably the go-to board for this year, looking at the forecast. But the SKX is obviously there for all those off days that the conditions are either really choppy, where a wide tail might be getting a bit skatey, or a bit more power, and he needs to hold his tail in just a little bit more through certain situations. So the SKX is kind of becoming more of a filling in the gaps kind of board, like wherever the waves aren't ideal, like 3-foot glassy waves, where the Sci-Fi can really stand above pretty much any other design I've built, or his competitors seem to be riding. It's just a good all-rounder, really.
Well, you mentioned the Sci-Fi when the waves are small. Our listeners might be interested to know we're sitting here watching round 1, heat 3 of the Trestles contest right now. The surf does look really small, but we can all still remember the Quicksilver Pro, 18 or 19 months ago, when Stewie first came out on the Sci-Fi and just went nuts on it, totally blew the board up. What was that like for you, if you can think back to the Quicksilver Pro, not this one this January, but the year before that, to watch Stu just annihilate the place on a board that you designed? Because, at that point, the shape wasn't really proven yet, and then boom, right out the gate, Stewie just went nuts on the thing, and the whole surfing world kind of freaked out. Do you remember that moment when you saw his surfing in that contest?
Sure, yeah, we all saw it. He really, went mad in that comp. And, for me, it was just par for the course. I've seen him surf that board a ton. I've been working on it a bunch with Kelly and also Stu, and a lot with Stu because he lives right around the corner, so he got to ride a lot of it in the development stage. So we knew how good it was going, and he was always, going to ride that board and riding it leading up to the event. So, we knew what it could do and what he could do, and the conditions of that event also really were in favour of the Sci-Fi, because basically the Sci-Fi will any waves that doesn't have a lot of power, or it's gutless or slopey or anything like that, the Sci-Fi will really shine giving you way more speed than a traditional shortboard. So it was not surprising how he surfed, but it was obviously super stoked to see him beat a lot of the top guys and really flare it up and show what he can do on tour. So,
well, you mentioned him and Kelly involved in the design of it. Who gives better feedback when it comes to refining a shape? Do they have different styles of giving feedback?
Yeah, they both. I mean, Kelly's got more intellectual feedback. Stewie's got more like raw feeling feedback, and probably maybe a little bit more honest, just based on our relationship and our friendship for a long period of time. So
Stu's not scared to say,
yeah,
I don't like something.
That board's dog shit or whatever.
So he'll come out and say, has he ever said it's dog shit?
Yeah, maybe a couple of times.
All right, cool.
Nah, but he's honest. And I know he's surfing really well. We have a lot of similarities in our approach to surfing. We're both kind of like attack a wave in a kind of a, I don't know, a relentless kind of way. Like he Stewie obviously likes to rip the bag out of a wave. So, and I can understand where he's coming at with his feedback a lot. So, but Kelly too. I think his style's really developed around the boards he's ridden over his career. So, I think he comes at things based on how he's familiar with his equipment, and then referencing perhaps my boards that he's ridden and making remarks about it that way. So, whereas Stu has ridden my boards and these kind of boards for quite a few years, so he's familiar with what to expect and what we could improve on or not improve on. So
this is like par for the course. Recording podcasts like this, I always kind of plan out a scope of the questions I want to talk about, and then I get into conversations and all this other stuff starts arising in my head. Do you remember when you got the call to launch Slater Designs with the Sci-Fi and the Omni? Because, I mean, the Slater Designs launched and it came out with the Banana, the Sci-Fi, and the Omni. So 2 of the boards that Slater Designs was built on were your designs. Do you remember where you were when you got that call and it said, hey, we're launching Slater Designs and you're like the designer that we're out the gates with?
Yeah, I think I was actually at Firewire at Currumbin, and I think Trav just told me that we're going to run with them. So that was obviously really exciting. I was pretty blown away. I mean, it was only 6 months earlier that I'd actually connected with Kelly properly for the first time in my life, and really connected with him and surfed, and he was super hyped on the Evo at the time, and that was super surreal moment in my career. Just because I've always seen Kelly as my biggest hero and inspiration to everything in my career, based on the fact how he always is evolving, trying new things, constantly getting better, bettering himself, eating better, just super focused. So I've always really been inspired by that level of thinking, and trying to emulate that in my own way. So to work with him and surf with him was rad, and it really inspired me. And then obviously I just pulled out all the bags of tricks that I've had in the past with MPH designs and tails and channels and all that kind of thing. And it was rad that he really enjoyed them and got into them, and backed it enough to launch his brand with. So it was a pretty special moment.
I mean, that's a huge endorsement. You know what I mean? That he could have gone to any shaper designer that he wanted to launch Slater Designs, and
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty insane. Like, I think about it that way, and you're like, whoa, yeah, you're right. But I'm really glad that I was able to convert with the Sci-Fi and do as well as it did. So that, obviously there's so much pressure on me to come up with boards that were.
So how do you tell me about that pressure? What does pressure feel like to you when it comes to designing a board?
Well, it people probably don't realize there is that much pressure, because you basically have to work on a design, and the whole world is going to judge that board really critically, especially when they look so different. I feel like people are just waiting to pick up on something wrong with it and collectively bag it out. So that may or may not be true, but that's kind of how I feel. So I put a lot of time. I'm super hypercritical with my designing. Especially with the opportunity Firewire's given me to just purely be a designer and not so much a manufacturer. And I really take that seriously, and I guess that's why I study so much scientific angles about design and then the feelings of the design and surfing it a bunch and keeping my surfing itself on a high enough level to really put the board through its paces and give this whole career opportunity I've been given the best possible shot at succeeding. And I've always been the biggest critic of my own work too. Like I'm so hypercritical. Obviously the people who know me know I'm a perfectionist to the highest degree with my designing. Like not only is every aesthetic part of the board just got to look perfect and feel incredible under the arm. Yeah. That's got to translate into the water and just pretty much blow your mind when you ride it. Like if I'm not like super inspired by a board when I ride it and like really feel that, oh my God, this is the best board I've ever ridden, then I'm not ready for it to go to market. So
yeah, you just reminded me of something that happened around a year ago. You were staying in Solana Beach, maybe like 20 minutes away from Firewire, and I went over to where you were staying, and you had your computer open out in the backyard. And I remember the backyard was really cool. There was like cactuses back there and a pool and all this stuff. And you opened up your computer and you had the SKX file and you were working on it. And you were like, look, this is just like the best shortboard file ever. It looks incredible. I'm going to silence my phone. I don't know why that's on. But you showed me the file and how ruthlessly you had been refining it, talking about how it was just the best file you've ever done. And then like a month later, you revised it again. So like I've seen firsthand how you're the most obsessive surfboard designer ever when it comes to refining your files. Do you know off the top of your head, like how many iterations does a design usually go through for you?
Well, it depends design to design. You know, some of the best boards I've ever shaped and some of my best work have been one-off hand shapes where I've just acted off a pure inspiration moment where I've like just got the download and just understood exactly what the board needed to be and then going into the shaping room and just hand shaping it and it comes out incredible and you just nail it. You know, the Vader was like that. A couple of my designs were just pure inspiration moments that they were just perfect and you didn't really want to change them. Yeah. Other ones require more work. Sometimes, you know, a design that you want to try and achieve and it takes more research and development to get it good. So the SKX is one of them purely because I'd gone off riding a lot of short boards and traditional kind of contests, squash tail, pointed noses, and kind of went on that other direction of the modern planing hull. So I had to kind of come back from being off that wavelength for a while. So obviously given the opportunity to release a short board to the mainstream market, for me, I felt a lot of pressure because there's so many good shapers of that design out there. So I felt like I'm going to be judged pretty critically compared to, you know, the other big name guys out there. So it was really important for me that I spend the extra time to develop that board, get the rocker right, get the template right, the rails really, really nice, and then also apply my bottom contours to a traditional design and, you know, hopefully have that enhance the board compared to the competition. So there was a lot going on with that design and I wasn't even sure that those bottom contours were going to work on a normal board. So it took a ton of revisions and I ended up probably doing about, I don't know, 20 or 30 file changes.
No kidding.
Yeah, so that's a lot, and a lot of time. And
that's tons of time.
Yeah, but at the end, I think it's worth it. The board came out really, really well, and like I say, one of my most important philosophies I've ever had in my career from day one when I first started shaping is no one knows how long it took you to shape a board. They only judge the board for what it is in the moment when you're picking it up in the parking lot or riding it. It doesn't matter if it took you 8 hours to hand shape it or 30 revisions of a file over a year and a half for the SKX. Like no one knows about that or it doesn't matter. It only matters how the board comes out in the end.
You're right.
And everyone will judge you on how it works in the water. So it's a no-brainer for me to just spend the time it takes to get a board just right.
You mentioned the quad inside single concave. The first board that you ever came out with that had the quad inside single concave was the Evo, right? And you've since found that it works really great in the Sci-Fi and the SKX. Obviously, a lot of people out there love surfing it and it feels great. Am I right that the main thing you're trying to accomplish with that concave setup is to make the board surf on the boundary layer of the water as opposed to be down in the water like a more traditional concave might create.
Yes, I guess, well, it's creating more lift. The more, it's generally accepted that concave creates lift. Mm-hmm. So to put concaves within concaves is going to enhance that whole lifting scenario. Mm-hmm. But I think the best benefit of that whole design is it not only does it add more lift, it separates the water flow onto different panels of the bottom. So mm-hmm. even though it's creating more lift as a whole over the whole bottom of the board, the rail areas of the board are going to be channeling water through a narrower pipe, so to speak. Mm-hmm. So you got a far more enhanced control and sensitivity off your rails. So it's a double benefit there. You're getting more lift, more control, without having, say, a tracky feeling that a normal channel might give you, where you kind of stay, if you put it on a channel bottom on rail, they real kind of track, and they're not really forgiving.
Yeah.
Whereas the quad inside single concave is really forgiving bottom. It feels loose, it feels free, and then it also feels faster because of the lift, and then more responsive as well.
So you've talked a lot about pressure. When you consider just how nuts the sci-fi went last year, won all these awards, everyone really enjoyed surfing it. We can get into the awards later. Did you think that you would have something that's gone as well as the sci-fi this year? I mean, do you consciously think to yourself, like, if the sci-fi goes out and does really, really well, you have to follow it up with something better or even more amazing? Like, does the success of a particular shape and the amount that people like it cause even more pressure to create one that people like even better?
Well, yes and no. I don't think I'm ever going to have as much pressure as I did with the sci-fi and Kelly releasing his brand and being, a big part of that. I think that's about as much pressure as you possibly can get in my world.
That probably is.
So kind of like to convert with that design with kind of limited time to develop it too. That was the other gnarly thing about that process is we only had like 6 months to create a concept or 2 concepts and then refine them and then push the green light on them. So
whoa.
So that was gnarly. Usually I like to take more time, especially in that situation. So
yeah,
that for me was the gnarliest pressure because it was basically just a lot of like just going off intuition and just backing yourself and not really even getting the proper development time and testing time. You kind of just had to go, that's going to work. All right, I'm not ready, but I'm going to push the green light anyway. So
yeah,
it was gnarly. But this time there's always that pressure there, and this time around there's less time constraints. So you got to be, if you're not sure, you got a bit more time to like maybe kick the tin around down the road a month more and get it right. So
yeah,
but you still feel it, but yeah, not as much as last year.
So you're in this interesting situation now where you are a few months removed from both the SEMA Awards and the SBIA Awards. And for our listeners, the SEMA Awards are the Surf Industry Manufacturers Awards in the United States, and then the SBIA Awards is basically the equivalent for Australia. And it was really crazy this year because the Sci-Fi won Performance Shortboard of the Year at SEMA, and the Sci-Fi also won Surfboard of the Year at SBIA Awards. I was really lucky in that I got to be at the SEMA Awards and the SBIA Awards, and that experience for me was really exciting because the room erupted in Australia when you won. Like, people were standing up, yelling, screaming. You gave a really good speech. I know that at the time it felt very validating and exciting for you to have won those awards. Like, now that you're a few months removed, how do you feel about those things today? What do they mean to you?
I mean, it's been a kind of a whirlwind couple of years, really. So, I mean, obviously they meant the world to me. I mean, as a shaper, you don't really go into the career path thinking about winning awards or trophies or titles of any sort. It's just kind of like a labor of love, and you hope to do well out of it. So to get that kind of response and to win those awards, yeah, it really meant a lot to me. It was really validating for all the work I put in on a different career path as far as my designing. So Yeah, it's really cool to be sitting here now and just, being able to achieve that, and then kind of looking forward from here and going, okay, what's my next goals? Because I feel like I've kind of reached an apex of a mountain of some sort, and I'm always the kind of guy that wants to evolve and keep pushing forward. So I guess now it's kind of trying to replicate that success and keep bringing it with new designs and really trying to push the envelope.
So I remember your acceptance speech at SBIA. You said something to the effect of, "It's good to win this in Australia because Australia is the home of the high performance shortboard," or something to that effect. And again, the room just erupted, when you said something like that. What specifically about surfboard design in Australia made you say whatever you said that night? And do you remember what you said that night in the speech?
Yeah, I think, I said that to that effect. I think what I was referring to, I think, is, the generation of MR and Simon Anderson and surfer shapers that really, like, to me, that was one of the biggest eras of innovation in the surf world, when they were like creating, breakthrough designs that really set the tone for what a high performance surfboard is. So to me, it felt like I was continuing that legacy in a small sense, of creating a very breakthrough design that has now come to be one of the highest selling. So I felt like I was continuing that tradition in a sense, and obviously that meant a lot. That was something that I aspired to at one point in my career. So it was good to do that. And obviously, there's a ton of rad designers all over the world these days. But I was waving the Aussie flag for the traditionalists out there.
Yeah. It was good. It was definitely a ruckus of applause that came out when you said that. I almost felt a little concerned, being one of the only Americans in the room. I thought that people might somehow attack me for being from America or something when you said that. Let's switch gears a little bit. I mean, what's your program like nowadays? Where are you living? How are you spending your time? What's kind of your day-to-day existence look like right now?
Well, I'm spending a lot more time home in Australia at the moment. Obviously, the past few years has been a whirlwind of travel, work, shaping, just going to contests with Stu, and it's been pretty hectic. So this year I kind of just geared down a little bit and just was spending a lot more time at home, just surfing the point at Lennox and just really enjoying myself, and kind of just taking or a few months to reset and kind of think about what comes next. So I mean, day to day I've just wake up, have a coffee and go check the surf and have a surf and sit on the rocks and just really enjoy the lifestyle at home for a few months and just recharge, and
for anyone who's seen your Instagram story, you kind of show the lifestyle on the rocks sometimes as you do goofy things with Stu Kennedy. Stu lives just up the road from you in Australia?
Yeah, he just lives up the road, like a kilometre away or something.
And how long have you known him?
Oh, I've known Stu since he was about 10, so he's 27 now, so 17 years.
Do you remember like the first time you met him, or anything that was unique about the way that you met him?
He's pretty much been the same, like goofy, cocky little bugger. And we pretty much it's funny because we've been mates for that long. We pretty much carry on about the same maturity level as we did when he was 10. Just, being goofy and just having fun, it's pretty easy to get caught up in being serious and even getting jaded, with surfing, doing it that long. But we just keep it fun and loose, and we're never short of a laugh, that's for sure.
It sure seems like it, man. Stewie, when I see him, he's always such a reserved, quiet, soft-spoken guy. But then I see images or videos of the two of you hanging out, and he's a totally different character. It seems like when he's around people he's comfortable with, he can be a real goofball, nutty, fun guy to hang around. He's
hilarious. I was just telling him yesterday, just stop making me laugh because I'm just losing it. I was getting pissed at him.
Really?
No, not really. It was. I mean, he's just hilarious. If you know him, he's the. He's what you see is what you get with Stu. He's the most genuine guy you probably ever meet. So
currently you're screwing around with Stewie Kennedy up a kilometer up the road from your house. You used to do a lot more surf trips. Am I right, or am I misperceiving that? I feel like you used to be on a lot more trips and like trips to Tavarua or wherever, chasing swells around.
Yeah, maybe just this year. I mean, I don't do a ton of trips, not as much as, say, a traveling free surfer guy or tour guys.
Yeah.
I'll just pick and choose good little windows to try and get good waves, really. So this year has just been a year where I just felt like I wanted to get more grounded, you know? Like, I've been living between California and Australia for quite a few years, and it's really hard when you don't have a base, you know, of a place where all your stuff is, waking up in the same bed every morning and just having a nice routine to just base your life off. So this year is the first year where I've had a bit of success. I've got a little more money than I had before, and now I can just kind of like just get a bit more grounded, you know. So that felt good. I felt like I needed that in my soul to have that, just a bit of grounding and just surf and just take a breath and kind of look around and appreciate where I've got to. So I feel like that's where I'm at, and I'm sure I'll be still doing plenty of trips in the future.
Well, you mentioned that you know, for your soul, you need to hang out, get grounded. And you mentioned you have a little bit more money than you used to have. A lot of people out there might not realize that there was a time in your life where you had no money. I remember stories about you driving around in a beat-up minivan around here with duct tape windows and stuff like that in the States. And I also remember you told me this story once. I can't remember the exact words you used, but you said something to the effect of like, Chris, it was a fevered night in September or something, and I was like, I'm not going to be a failure, and I'm going to make something of myself, and I just went into a shaping bay in Lenox, and I banged out like a Vader, a Vanguard, and a Nano all in one night in some like frenzied, feverish, determined to make something of yourself moment. Am I remembering that right? Was there a moment like that?
Yeah, well, it wasn't just a single night. It was probably like a week or a few days of where I got the download. And
so the download. So
when I say download, like the inspiration,
yeah,
I like to call them downloads. Whenever you have great ideas or feelings or understandings about things,
yeah,
I call them downloads.
Let me pause this. So where do you think? Because look, you're a deep guy. You're very much into science. You also have a spiritual side. Where do you think the downloads come from? I mean, do you have a spiritual guiding belief?
Yeah, I feel. I don't know. It's a, you know, obviously I study a lot of quantum physics and then metaphysical stuff, and there's a lot of similarities between the spiritual world and then the purely scientific quantum world. One of those is that concept of either the ether or the vacuum of space being able to have information in it. You know, that I kind of feel like ideas come to you. They're not necessarily created by you. They come to you, you know. So I feel that sense of like getting, if you're open and if you're tuned in like a radio to the station of the information you're trying to bring in, you can just click into some really potent concepts. And I feel like that's always, you know, with the right desire, the right attitude, and the right motivation, you can really bring in whether it's the ideas or attracting the right moments in your life to help you keep moving forward on the path that you're supposed to be on. So when I say downloads, I mean just ideas that come to you and inspirational moments. That for me was, in the example of surfboard design, was and to your point, the week I had in 2009, I just got the idea of those modern planing holes, and based off the Bob Simmons planing holes of the 50s and his engineering background, which brought him to study surfboards in a scientific sense. I took on that foundation of studying a surfboard design based on scientific sense, and then basically modernizing that concept to be an ultra futuristic hull design that's kind of like a skateboard or a wakeboard for surfing, and it just came to me on that moment in I think it was June 2009, and at the time I was personally going through a lot of hard times, and I was really down, and it was kind of like I felt like it was a real moment of my career where it could have gone either way. I could have just kind of like said, screw this, I'm giving up, and hit the bottle or something, just it was a real low point in my career. But I wanted to be a successful surfboard designer just so passionately badly that and I was just kind of meditating on that, or just focusing on that, and then it just came to me like a bolt of lightning. I knew exactly what surfboards had to be, like clear, high definition, clear. Like I knew what they needed to look like, the size, the thickness, everything about them. I just know that's it, and that's going to be it, and that's what it's going to be. And I just took every cent I had, which was not much, to just buy like 4 or 5 blanks, and like that's all I had. And I just went in there and just mowed them out before the inspiration passed.
So you were there in Australia, and this inspiration hits you, and you can see in your head like what a Vanguard and a Vader and a Nano look like. Mm-hmm. Where were you? Were you like looking off into the ocean? Were you lying in bed at night? Were you walking down the street to go get a Vegemite sandwich? I mean, do you remember where you were and what you were doing when that inspiration hits you? Because let's be real, for anyone listening to this right now, you can go Google Tomo Vanguard, Tomo Vader, or Tomo Nano. There are not surfboards that looked like those things previous to you seeing them in your head. Even if you go look at Bob Simmons' stuff, they look nothing like any of those boards. You just kind of borrowed his approach or his way of viewing things. So I'm fascinated by this thought of like, where are you when boom, like you see those things in your head? You're like eating dinner, you're in the shower?
No, I think I was in the shape room shaping something else, like a fish, or the idea came to me slowly, like, I want to try and make a small little tiny board. And then you go on the blank and try to draw it out, and then you put a few different curves on the board, and then all of a sudden, bang, you're like, oh, what about if I do it like that way? And then you draw it out, and then all of a sudden you're like, that leads you to a little bit more parallel outline, and then all of a sudden you kind of get the concept of what it needs to be. So I think I was just shaping, and then had the idea of where I wanted to go with things, and then I think the aha moment was just the exact aspect ratio, and because when you make a rectangular board, they're usually really way too wide, and they end up looking like boogie boards pretty quick, and you're like, you don't want that, obviously. So the idea to get them super narrow and super short was, for most shapers, that those concepts don't really equate to functional volume and functional rail line. Like, it just seems
even
complete
now,
abstract.
Even years later, looking back, it still seems crazy that you got them that narrow.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like, the first one I did was 411 by 17 inches wide and 2 inches thick.
Jeez.
So they just, that numbers don't make sense
at all
when you're applying traditional curves.
Am I right that the first Vanguard you ever made for someone other than you did that end up going to Chloe Andino somehow?
Well, the Vanguard came after the Vader, and so I had the concept of the template down. I knew what it needed to be in the basic aspect ratio and such. So, but yeah, I did one around about the same time. I was living in California, and I was surfing trestles on one of those boards on the Vader, and Kaloe was he was a grom at that time, 16 or 17 or something, and he saw it and he was like, that's really cool, whatever. And he said, do me one, like, kind of like just off a cuff. And I was like, yeah, sure. And he didn't give me any money or anything like that. I just was like, this is a good opportunity, you know, so I'll just build one for him, and if I happen to see him, I'll go, here's the board. And around the same time, I connected with Tom Curran again. Some people might not know, but he was a long-time family friend of my dad. Yeah. And I was lucky enough to have him come stay at my house when I was like 8 years old and stuff, when he was like the king of surfing back then. So he was a big inspiration to me at a young age too.
So Curran and Kaloe get Vanguards at roughly the same time.
Yeah, so exactly the same time, and yeah, I just shaped those boards with a lot of care. Obviously, if there was a big opportunity, and I wanted to create something really cool, and hopefully they would ride them. I wasn't sure if they were going to, but
yeah.
so as it turned out, I don't know if Kaloe ever did ride his.
But didn't it come back to you? Like you gave Kaloe a Vanguard like 6 years ago,
Yeah.
And didn't you recently just get that Vanguard back?
It was probably a couple of years ago now, but yeah, I saw it on Craigslist. Like, or someone went, "Oh, there's like I don't know how it happened, but it was just like complete chance of." I never look at Craigslist ever, but for some reason I did, and there it was, and I'm like, "That's the board." And then I actually went and tracked it down and got it back.
Wow!
So I actually got that board back, and yeah, so it's a part of the collection now because this is the first ever Vanguard, and it is an amazing. Like I looked at it and it was like that board's perfect. I should have scanned that as the original.
So, am I right that before the Vanguard Vader Nano, you were making a lot of twin fins?
Yes.
So the interesting thing about your kind of journey, Dan, is like you were making these very unique twin fins
or dual fins.
Dual fins.
More like keel fin fish kind of lineage rather than twinnies, because there is a difference between those two designs.
How do you describe the difference between those two?
Well,
a lot of people might not recognize that distinction. Well,
a twin fin it's more about where the fins are placed more than the pure shape of the board. A twin fin is generally a higher aspect fin that's a single foiled fin that has a toe into the nose of the board. So the fins are pointed towards the nose. They got a deeper, higher aspect fin template. That's your traditionally your standard twin fin concept. A dual fin or a keel is more of a double foiled, wider base, shorter aspect fin. That the fin concept is more for directional stability down the line. So a dual fin is traditionally pretty drivey, whereas a twin fin is real loose and skatey. So even though they're both two fins, it's easy to get them confused for your average guy, but there's a significant difference in the performance of those two designs.
So you were making these dual fins, then you have this kind of paradigm shift where you create these modern planing hulls, like the Vanguard, the Evo, the Vader. Then you have this kind of paradigm shift where you've come into the sci-fi and the SKX. You've mentioned that you have this scientific approach. For example, one of the things you're going to do when you're in town right now is link up with Riccardo Rossi, who a lot of people might remember did computer fluid dynamics tests on the Omni, the Vader, and the Sci-Fi. You're going to link up with him and go over some stuff that he's been doing testing the SKX. But you're not scared of changing things every few years. Where are you at now as far as just your general design philosophy? Like, what changes have you been going through as far as the way you view surfboard design? Because it's interesting to see dual fins, modern planing hulls, then this shift to like short boards with quad inside single concaves. I'm always interested in like kind of the trip that you're on next.
Well, I guess the main thing with the philosophy is to remain fluid and continually evolve. I think it would be really easy for me to hang my hat on the modern planing hull and go, "Oh, that's my contribution," or whatever. And I think some shapers who have done things like that in the past have kind of just like hung their hat on a design. But I like to evolve, to keep things new, keep things fresh, and I think obviously my evolution was like breaking the norm of going off short boards and going to the keel fins and the dual fins and riding them and experiencing a whole different way to surf and continually trying to inspire yourself, riding different equipment. And then from there, that led into the world of the planing hull, going from keel fins, working back from Steve Liss back to Simmons, and then looking at the planing hulls and then designing really short noseless boards with parallel rails. That was the next kind of natural evolution of going off the whole shortboard thing and following my own intuition. And then from there, it's kind of, working with Kelly and being more involved in the WSL side of things with Stu as well. Once he qualified, I had to visit the whole shortboard world and get him, involved with that in order to have designs that are recognised in that side of the surfing world. So
Yeah.
that, it would be easy for me to be stubborn and kind of go, well, no, you guys should ride this kind of board, otherwise that's not my deal. And which it was kind of a challenge for me to do as well, to visit the whole normal shortboard thing.
Yeah.
Because I was burnt out at that 10 years ago, but now it makes sense for me to be building those again. So I'm more than happy to try and take what I've learned on my journey through the planing hole and apply it to a shortboard. So.
And where are you at as far as the distinction between, I guess I'm asking you if shaping is an art form or not.
To be honest, I don't think it's an art form at all. I think traditionally people have seen it as an art form, but I think that's because they don't understand what's physically going on in the water. To me, it's purely a science.
Mm-hmm.
We're dealing with physics. We're dealing with objects moving through water.
Yeah.
It's fluid dynamics. It's more akin to naval architecture. It's almost like saying that like airplane design's an art form. I mean, it's just not going to fly. If you ask a naval architect or someone who designs an aircraft, like, is it an art form? They'd raise an eyebrow at you and say, "What have you been smoking?" So
I don't want to get on a plane that was designed by an artist.
Exactly.
I do not want to fly on that plane. I want to
Yeah.
get on a plane that was designed by an engineer, man.
Exactly. So we operate in a purely scientific medium. It's water, and it's objects moving through water.
Yeah.
And it can be studied and can be understood really well. So, I think the act of riding a wave is somewhat artistic.
Mm-hmm.
Like everybody's got a creative way how they approach riding waves. But I guess even that can be studied in body mechanics and
Mm-hmm.
sports science as well. So I think surfing's a lot more scientific than people think. And I think surfboard design should be really studied in that sense to get more productive developments in the design. So I think that style of designing has been really beneficial from my creative process as well. Like that's not to say that you can't be inspired to create, a design. It doesn't mean you can't be creative. It doesn't mean you can't have like really cool ideas to shape a board. But I think to assess those ideas and put it through a scientific way, judgment and understanding design better.
Put it through a scientific process.
Exactly. So I think that it's providing much better results doing things in that manner for me, at least.
So you've spent some time up at the Kelly Slater Wave Co. It seems like the scientific method has a lot of applications at a wave environment that's the same every time.
Mm-hmm.
Like, do you look at because everyone has their different opinions on the wave pools. Do you look at those as something that could be uniquely impactful for your style of designing surfboards and refining shapes?
Yes and no. I think it will influence a lot of shapers to look at designing more scientifically based on the repetition of the perfect quality wave coming through every time, which is exactly the same. But at the end of the day, even if the wave that you're riding is different in the ocean, if it's a bit more windy or lumpy or whatever, it's still functionally we're working in the same water environment, and boards can be studied in a flat water sense, with CFD or a more repetitive pool style scenario.
Yeah.
It's still all going to be a scientific process. So I don't know if it's going to change too much of how I design a board. It's just going to be the micro adjustments that we can tune better and better using repetitive wave situations like a wave pool, and refining the process even more.
So you got into like a new kind of surfboard design process recently with Peter Mell when you designed him a step up for Mavs. I looked at that board, and to me it looked like the step up version of it looked insane. What was the process like for you designing a board for Mavericks with Peter Mell? And is it something you want to do more of?
Totally. Well, I had that idea for that board for many years, but I just never had the right timing or
Maybe tell us a little
scenario.
bit about the board. What
Well,
was the design?
It was a 9-foot dual fin. It had a fishtail, so it was basically, if you took a retro fish somewhat and then stretched it out to 9 foot by like 21 and just made it a big straight rail fish with a keel fin setup.
Which is crazy to think about.
Well, yes and no, because I guess I look back again to the Simmons lineage, and he was riding Hawaii back in the 50s on these 9.0 dual fins and with massively wide tails and having a ton of success, like from all accounts.
Which you did a little bit of too, huh?
And then yeah, we built a few. My dad and I built a few bigger fishes about 2013, 2012.
Uh-huh.
They were about like 6'7" length and just built for bigger waves, and they worked incredibly well. Like, they felt so much better than a traditional pintail once the waves got bigger and more open faced, where you kind of needed speed again. Like generally, like if it's a heavy wave with a lot of contour and shape and hollow, like chopu or pipe, those boards aren't designed for that kind of waves. But if you're talking like Sunset Beach or Mavericks, Waimea, Jaws, like anything where it's big, open face, like massive power, you want the boards to be like flying. You want them to be like high control and also like outrunning that pitching lip.
Yeah.
Because so often you see those guys like take off and just get mowed down
all the time.
All the time. And to me, I saw that as an equipment failure. They weren't the correct designs for those waves. So I knew a big wide tail block board with a big straight rail line was probably going to work better. So it was about applying those concepts to that design correctly. And I talked to Pete about it last year when I was in Portugal with Stu. We had a lot of lay days around that event, and he was super fired up on the concept when I told him. And he said, like, well, do me one. I was like, well, sure. I'll put it together. So I designed a board on Shape 3D, purely just computer designed, and I added the quad inside single concave, except I didn't put it inside a concave. It was a quad inside V bottom. So I have a deep V running all the way through the board, then put like a multiple concave through a V. So it almost, in a very basic sense, looks like a jet ski hull.
So you switched every single thing about like common design knowledge for a step-up board, for a big wave board at Mavericks or Waimea or whatever.
Gnarly situation.
You basically did literally everything different.
Yeah, it had a concave deck. It had a beveled step down rail, so the rail's super low volume, and then it scoops out into a concave deck. Radical bottom. Basically just did the rockers and all this just off eye on a computer screen, and it was a pretty wild, far-fetched design. And I knew the concept seemed like the right concept, and then I did it for Peter, and he wrote it immediately on one of the gnarliest days of the winter.
The photo of him going over the ledge on that board is crazy.
Yeah.
You know that one where he's like right there, right on the ledge, right as he gets to his feet?
Totally. It was so hectic.
So nuts. Like, I saw that and I was like, dude, if I'm Tomo, I'm freaking out. Like, this guy's surfing my board in a wave that could kill him.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
But I talked to him, and he said that he rode it that day, and he got a bunch of really good waves, and he was super confident with the board. He was stoked on how it was performing, and I think that's why he was so confident, was to start rushing over some big ledges. But yeah, so all accounts were really, really good on that board. He in fact said, don't change a thing, which is about the best feedback you can get, especially on such a wild concept. So I think that design is going to be worth exploring a lot more this winter. So I'm hoping to do a few more for some crew this winter, and potentially innovating that world.
It's a really, in hindsight, it seems like such an obvious thing. Why isn't there a board that's holding on the drop for these guys and also outrunning the section when it crashes? Because you see these guys make drops constantly and then they just get obliterated. And in hindsight, it seems so obvious that there would be room for innovation in that department. A couple more quick thoughts before we let you go, because you do have to get back up to trestles for Stewie's heat. Something interesting about you, like I think everyone grasps that you're a good surfer. I mean, you were even a prospect when you were younger, had sponsors, things like this. I mean, at one point you did have a shot at a career just as a surfer. You don't seem to put that much effort into promoting your own surfing, though. Like, you don't really seem to try to get photos or promote your trips. Am I right about that? And why is that? Because it seems like your level of surfing ability would be pretty beneficial if you went out there and tried to build your brand off of it.
Well, I don't know. That's an interesting question. I guess it just comes down to a personal thing. I never really enjoyed being the self promoter.
Mm-hmm.
That a lot of, that you kind of got to do this in this day and age. So, I'm caught between, like, I prefer to be under the radar, like just doing my own thing and not really making too much of a fuss. But the more that my shaping career has come up, it makes more sense for me to promote myself. But I don't know. I just enjoy surfing and just doing it on my own time, and I'm not really making a big deal out of it. But at the same time, whenever I can, I try and shoot some stuff and continue to push forward. I think I just like to continue to push myself to surf better, and I just enjoy that process of just loving surfing,
Mm-hmm. Well, I hope next year we get more surf footage of you than we got this year, because I think you're uniquely good at carrying speed through maneuvers. Maybe it's because you're so in tune with your boards. But for now, and I hope we get you on another podcast or a video project soon, for now we can wrap up this with a last question that I like to ask everyone that we have on the podcast. Tonight, after Stewie's Heat, maybe after you surf this afternoon, you come back to Solana Beach, you're going to whip out your phone and you're going to send a text from your phone. That text is going to reach the cell phone of every single person on the planet. What is that text message going to say? What are you going to blast to the cell phone of every human being on Earth?
I guess I just tell everyone to have a constant evolution, evolve, never be happy with who you are, always push yourself to be better at whatever you may be doing.
I like that. Evolve. That's it, Dan. Thanks.
Right on, Chris. Thanks, man.
And that is it for this episode of the Wire Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, you can rate it 5 stars on iTunes, and we'll see you soon.